Well, whatever the movie was like, at least we have to look on the bright side. At least they made the meme a reality. Are they dressed as princesses? Yes, Snow White's grandmother. Well, you're more black than white. After nearly 9 years, after a controversial cast, after controversial opinions and many re recordings, Snow White finally arrived. A movie that tries to bring back that classic from 1937, considered the first animated film in history. Now the question is, will this movie be able to replicate the cultural phenomenon that the original implied? Can we get close to that level of quality? No, obviously not. Why am I going to give you more filler? But first, a bit of context. Disney has been making live-action versions of their animated classics for some time now, from quite good ones like Cinderella, around 2015, where it shows that, if you want, you can do something interesting by retouching an old story, to aberrations and crimes against humanity, like the live-action of Mulan a few years ago, and what about now? The use of concentration camps as filming locations was not the only problematic aspect of the production. The live-action adaptations were deteriorating, stripping away the charisma and color of the animated versions in an effort to achieve a more serious and realistic tone, completely destroying the original work. In fact, most of the live action that Disney has been giving us has only served to appreciate their old animated versions even more. And thank God that increasingly, at least here in the West, animation is moving further and further away from that idea of being a product exclusively for children. Not only because of the immense globalization of anime coming from the East, but also because of Western series, which have demonstrated the potential of animation for adults. Like Invincible, video on the channel, very good, highly recommended. The thing is that Snow White was attacked from all the places where they could attack her. The casting of Rachel Felgel as Snow White was quite notorious due to the fact that, well, the girl is called Snow White because supposedly her skin is as white as snow. And while Rachel is not Mutombo, she's not African here. It's not like she's black either. Well, she also doesn't follow the original story's idea of a woman, well, as white as snow, which is already a bit of a, well, strange decision. Then it got even worse when it was announced that Gal Gadot would be the evil queen, which is curious because probably Gal Gadot. She would have probably done a better job as Snow White than Snow White herself. Surely the role would have suited her more. I wouldn't say I would reverse the roles, because obviously the evil witch has to be a bit older than this Rachel. Anyway, I believe you mostly grasp what I'm talking about. I must admit it was very strange to see people seriously discussing the beauty of two actresses for such a long time. I haven't seen people this annoying since Zendaya. Jeez. I find both those who idolize her and those who despise her equally annoying. Everyone's so exhausting. But the issue with these two ends there, doesn't it? And well, Rachel's very open about her support for Palestine. And, well, let's see, we're going to get into a slightly weird topic, but me being a gamer, I'm Lamine Yamal from Murcha. I'm going to try to dodge a bit so we don't delve too deeply into that topic. Basically, as you know, this country's at war with another. And Gal Gadot, this actress who is the evil witch here and who was Wonder Woman and all that stuff, well, it turns out she is of the nationality of the country that Palestine is against, which is Israel, right? So there were rumors that these two couldn't stand each other on set, which is very strange. This thing about hating a person for their nationality just because that person's country's at war. It's strange to sympathize more with one side. People can be foolish these days, but what do I really know in the end? And the attitude they showed together during the Oscars presentation didn't help. Then came the controversial words of Raquelita, who had no better idea than to openly rant. Not only to the original movie, whose media impact allowed Disney to be what it is today, but she also said that the prince's role was completely irrelevant and could be removed from the movie, which obviously was seen by the people as first a personal attack against her coworker, and second, as the biggest stupidity said by a human being, at least that year. And, well, the thing went on, and it could be like this all day. Because the truth is that this actress is quite annoying. To illustrate, a similar situation occurred with The Little Mermaid. They cast an actress, in this case, I believe she was African American, but this girl, as she didn't make a fuss, or I don't remember her making a fuss, well, it just stayed like that. But this Rachel, or whatever, well, the truth is she's quite annoying. But, well, this is where it ends, right? Well, no, Peter Dinklage comes out, or however you say it also, damn, these shitty, unpronounceable American surnames. Famous dwarf actor, known for Game of Thrones. You know who I'm talking about, right? Among other works, he said that the concept of a story of 7 dwarfs living in a cave seemed like a backward story to him. This may have influenced Disney, or it may not have, but the point is that there would no longer be dwarfs in the movie. Which upset a lot of people because the dwarfs are iconic. And besides, it's already hard for people with dwarfism to find work in acting. Imagine now that 7 people suddenly lose their potential jobs. I also understand that people with dwarfism want, well, roles, damn it, in quotes normal, that they don't feel like working. Or as a dwarf, or as an Oompa Loompa, but I don't know. We also have to respect that if 7 people with dwarfism want to participate on the set, well, they have the right. Technically, right? I think I don't know. The fact is that Disney regretted it, and in the end added the dwarves. But against all odds, they did it in computer-generated imagery, so we got the worst possible outcome. As you can see, the movie has been attacked from all sides. That's what sometimes happens when trying to adapt a classic. This classic has a context of almost 100 years ago, and obviously, mindsets have changed quite a bit. It's difficult, but not necessarily for the worse. After all, this movie was mainly aimed at children. Children should only care that the movie is fun and engaging for its nearly 2-hour duration, not about the controversies surrounding it. However, I already have enough hair on my balls to pay for my own ticket, like a big boy. Buy myself a large-size popcorn and large-size soda, the small candies. Because if not, I get a stomachache and go to see this movie with all the internet context in my head. So join me, boys and girls, dwarfs and bandits. This is just Snow White, because putting Snow White and the 7 dwarfs was discriminatory or something like that. I don't understand anything these days. The movie starts with the filmmakers realizing they need to quickly justify the movie's title. And you see, in the original movie, the name Snow White was because her skin tone was as white as snow. But by now, we all know that Rachel is not as dark-skinned as many claim. Ooh, because you just have to look at her. In fact, she almost just looks like a slightly tanned white woman. At most, I would say she has some Latin or Arab roots. I even doubt that she has African-American roots. Well, 10 doesn't fit the small characteristic implied by the protagonist's name, as she has tanned, slightly brown skin. So to justify the name Snow White without being as white as snow, this was obviously done in the most forced way possible, unnecessarily. The movie literally shows us that having been born in the middle of a heavy snowstorm, it was decided that her name would be Snow White. This is the typical moment for reflection. Was it that easy to just hire an actress who fit the parameters better? But, well, it doesn't matter. What's done is done. I love it because it's like the dad joke. Why is my sister named Rose? Because your mother liked roses. Wow, that's beautiful. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome. Fuera compito. Then follows a musical number in which they introduce us to the world of the movie. Snow White, the princess of a colorful, joyful kingdom typical of musicals, lived happily surrounded by sugar and flowers. La 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 la. And just when it seemed that Snow White was destined to be a humble and fair princess, the queen and mother of the girl dies. And even though the father was devastated to lose his wife, with nothing that Gal Gadot came to console him, well, the guy said, and these two get married. And it seems that Gal Gadot will be a good stepmother, treating little Snow White well and all that stuff. Until one day, Snow White's king and father embarks on a mission to prevent something from attacking the kingdom. But he never returned. Gal Gadot reveals herself as the evil queen, admitting she lied about being good. In pure Nicolas Maduro government style, she steals all the people's wealth and keeps it for herself. The queen also possesses a magic mirror that constantly reminds her of her unmatched beauty and self-indulgence throughout the kingdom. Well, she does all this to maintain the status of the most beautiful. While the kingdom is subjected to the tyranny of the evil queen, Snow White is locked in the castle and treated like a slave, despite being the rightful heir. Like when Goku was locked up for 1,000 years in the time room. During one of her typical days spent sweeping the floor, a thief suddenly appears, stealing chips. Well, the poor have nothing to eat, and the queen has everything, right? Classic? I appreciate the change made to the prince's character, as he is now a developed character rather than a plot device, as in the original story. In the final moment of the original movie, the character appears in only 2 scenes, the introduction and the kissing scene. You can't get too attached to a character in this context, and on top of that, the original one was kissing pigeons. It's very much like that because... But anyway, Snow White tells him, "Oh, stealing is wrong because it's bad, you can't steal." And the prince says, "I don't give a damn, I'm hungry," and he escapes. So, after witnessing how the poor have to steal to survive, Snow White asks her stepmother, the evil queen, to please be kinder and fairer to the citizens, to which the queen simply says, "You know what? Eat, damn it." Immediately after the prince is captured, since he stole from the queen, she will take his clothes and leave him to die from the cold. As Snow White told her, she had to be fairer. Ah, another song, La La La, my parents abandoned me, the kingdom is doomed. Seriously? Even though musical moments are the most boring thing in the world, visually, these songs don't sound bad, would be missing more. If on top of that, the songs are crap, like what happened with the Joker, then there's nothing redeemable. Snow White realizes the prince was tied up to die in the cold. She frees him, gives him bread, and flees. The evil queen witnessed all of this, and upon seeing her beloved stepdaughter's disobedience, decided to consult her magic mirror to reaffirm her beauty. However, even though the latter affirms her position as the most beautiful, the same mirror tells her that now someone more beautiful has emerged, this being Snow White herself, the mirror says. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I've been lying to you daily for almost 10 years, and for some reason that I'm not going to tell you now. I've just decided to be honest now." So the queen says, "Okay, I'm going to do something chill. I'm not upset. I'm going to do something calm. I'm going to send one of my best men, and I'll force him to murder and rip the heart out of the 15-year-old girl." Something calm, right? Something chill? So, at the queen's command, that man and Snow White leave the city to pick apples. Snow White's iconic dress is shown, and it appears as cheap and tacky as in the leaked images. They look like those little dresses, I don't know, like $10 that you buy for your little niece. Just as the hunter was about to kill the girl, he has a change of heart at the last moment. He warns her to flee, saying the old woman is insane. She fled to the forest, which had seemingly come to life and now wanted to kill her. Imagine being in such a forest. And hey, at least here they gave an extra reason to the hunter not to kill Snow White. In the original, he spared her life upon seeing her gaze. In this version, he accompanied Snow White while her parents were still alive. As one of the evil queen's most loyal men, it is hinted that this bastard has served for a long time, even under the late king. So trying to kill a young woman who knows details, well, I guess it was too much for him. In the original, he had a psychopathic face. Snow White runs and finds herself confronted by the fierce gaze of a monster. When I say a monster, I'm referring to a beautiful deer, created with the most unrealistic computer-generated imagery I've ever witnessed. It literally looks like the typical artificial intelligence video you would find on TikTok. Style. What would happen if Sonic goes to buy bread at Catapec? And let's see, being these computer-generated imagery animals and the way they made them, they knew they couldn't create convincing, hyper-realistic animals, or if they did, they would be the most boring animals in the world. The live-action Lion King movie resembles a dubbed documentary parody rather than a true live-action adaptation. So in the end, they decided to create these more animated animals. Based on the eyes and movements, it seems they prioritized expressive animals over realism, resulting in an odd appearance. It's unsettling. Anyway, Snow White ends up arriving at the blessed house of the dwarves. At the house of the magical creatures of short stature. That sounds worse since they're supposed to be magical little creatures now, not dwarves. For those who don't recall the original movie, this scene depicts Snow White's arrival at the dwarf's house. Upon arriving at their house, she and the animals begin cleaning and sweeping. So the homeowners allow Snow White to stay for a while. However, Snow White arrives here. I don't care who lives here. And speaking of them, what the hell are these things? Please, tell me what is the level of the valley? Disturbing. It's over 8,000. The dwarfs appear tough. The song is good and the mine stage with shimmering crystals looks great. But I can't stop seeing these crimes against humanity. It really turns my stomach. Not only do the dwarves look terrible with the attempt at hyperrealism that makes me uncomfortable, but because here they had the perfect opportunity to be inclusive. Peter Dinklage says that putting dwarves living in caves is discriminatory and promotes harmful stereotypes against dwarves. Which he may have a point, because just with the phrase dwarf living in a cave, I almost burst out laughing. I don't want to be mean. Disney goes and takes away the job from the 7 possible actors. Even he could have been there. It would have been epic. Dwarfs work, not live in caves. But it's all for being the only employed dwarf in Hollywood, right? Son of a bitch. Want to be the only one, huh, little guy? Dwarfs work until it's time to leave and they head home. In a sequence that I found beautiful and dynamic, at least when the faces aren't visible. Upon arriving home, they face sheer terror. An intruder had entered their house and was sleeping in 3 of their beds. What a horrifying situation. Surprisingly, they weren't angry with the girl who broke into their house simply because she said her name was Snow White. And all the dwarfs agree to let her stay. Have you heard the tale of the princess who vanished long ago after being imprisoned by the queen following her parents' death? While all this was happening, the wicked queen, certain of Snow White's death, asked her mirror again who was the fairest. The mirror reveals that Snow White is alive. Only then does the queen check the box from the hunter, which supposedly contains Snow White's heart. Rather than a heart, she discovered an apple. Let's analyze this gradually. First, the queen gave that box to the hunter, so that when he killed Snow White, he would literally rip out her heart and put it in there, so she could verify that she had indeed died. Didn't it occur to her to open the box and look at that moment? I mean, evil enough to order a heart ripped out, but not to take a look? Second, why the hell did the hunter leave an apple there? Because in the original movie, the joke is that the hunter put a pig's heart to mislead the queen, which makes sense. Though she quickly realizes it's a fake heart, the hunter meant to trick her. But why an apple? Literally, he could have put, I don't know, a Goku Funko Pop, and it would have been the same result. I mean, what do you think? That just because an apple is red and round, the queen is going to be so damn foolish to think it's a heart? It seems insulting to the villain of the story. She captures the hunter, who tells her that if she's considering forgiving him, she should forgive Snow White as well. So she responds in the only possible way with a song about how beautiful and powerful she is, to which I will only say one thing: blessed. Dubbing that allows mediocre performances to go completely unnoticed by us. I mean, how bad for those shitty actors who have more work than actors who are barely trying to survive. But do you guys understand? This lady behaves terribly. In this musical number, Gal Gadot's expressions are so exaggerated that it's hard to take her seriously. Dubbing masks the issue, but the original language clips reveal the horrible acting. It has the same problem that Michael Keaton's Batman had, where his suit seems to be so tight around the neck that he can't even turn it, so he has to move very abruptly. And that makes it comical. And at the end of the musical number, damn, that look of, check out how cool I look. Anyway, oh no, not more computer-generated imagery monstrosities. It seems these 7 jerks have cohabited for nearly 3 centuries and they despise one another. I understand the plot is necessary for the movie, but I believe they could have devised a better storyline. We've coexisted for 3 centuries and we have hated each other from the first second. But it's no problem, because Snow White the Savior is here. She just had to teach Dopey or Tontine in Latin America how to whistle. Now clean up everything you broke while singing la 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 la. I won't touch a broom even if I'm crazy because I'm a lazy bum. La 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 la. Now seriously, I did find the contrast between this movie and the original with this scene funny. Because of all that in the original Snow White, and the animals cleaned the whole house, and here she just motivates the dwarves to clean. But she doesn't do a damn thing. And of course, it's not her house. But damn, if you're a guest, you can lend a hand, right? Your hands aren't going to fall off, right? Stupid? But anyway, there are people who associated this scene with the fact that the actress showed on multiple occasions, and very openly, her discontent and disapproval towards the original movie. With the whole theme here that she is a strong and independent woman, one of those rare ones. Because being strong and independent is not washing your ass for some reason. Completely ignoring that the movie starts with her being a slave who takes care of cleaning, but whatever. Either way, the change is weird. So, after cleaning the house and a human had to come for these dwarfs to get along, for the first time in nearly 3 centuries, she realizes there are bandits fighting in the name of her father, the king. The hunter confessed that the queen lied, revealing that Snow White's father was alive. Snow White trusted the hunter and withdrew, leaving these digital aberrations behind for now. So Snow White walks and is captured, but not by the queen, but by the prince. Well, the latter realized that the evil queen's royal guard was looking for the girl. So the prince, whose real name is Jonathan, introduces her to his group of 7 bandits. And here we have to get into a bit of controversy. Quite some time ago, the first photo from the Snow White set was leaked, in which the 7 bandits were shown with the aforementioned girl. Many assume that Disney's push for diversity meant replacing the dwarves with 7 characters of various ethnicities. So Disney had to come out and clarify that the photo was fake, because they couldn't admit that the leak was real either. In the end, despite everything, the dwarves were going to appear and people calmed down. Until in the trailer we saw that they weren't 7 dwarf actors, but these damn messes. So the theory of certain people is as follows. These 7 bandits were originally going to be the replacement for the 7 dwarves, but by not including the dwarves, they still got into a problem. And seeing the very negative reaction from people, they decided to back down. Since they had already hired the 7 actors, they decided to keep them in the movie. Though I honestly question the reason for doing so. Would they include these 7 characters coincidentally? It was coincidentally leaked that the 7 dwarfs will be included, and they will be in computer-generated imagery. 14 secondary characters. They just show up, say 2 lines, and leave. Look, I don't know. I'm not very conspiratorial, but this is a bit suspicious, my people. After a musical moment that attempts to explore further, in the relationship between Snow White and Jonathan, the royal guard appears. So Jonathan and company decide to sacrifice themselves so that Snow White can escape. However, she doesn't leave them alone and distracts the guards, which is quite a stupid scene, I must admit. The guards had cornered the bandits and Jonathan, but they left the bandits unsupervised to pursue Snow White upon seeing her. She steals a horse and returns to the bandits, allowing them all to escape together. If they had left some guards watching the bandits, their plan would have failed. But plot conveniences. Everything went well, except it didn't. Because a knight finds them and points a crossbow at Snow White. Jonathan steps in and takes the arrow hit meant for someone else. He is then taken to the dwarves for healing. And even though at first they don't want to help some bandits, it's Snow White herself who asks the dwarves to help. But it appears that they can't save him, despite their efforts. In reality, the bastard survives, and not even the wise dwarf knows how he was saved. Now that everything went well, it's time to dance. In addition, Snow White makes eyes at Jonathan to the point of singing about the possible love that arises between them. Hey Rachel, hadn't you said that the prince's participation was so small that you could remove him from the movie? Yes, shut up, dude. Shut up, sexist. After a near kiss, Jonathan and the bandits leave to stop the guards from discovering and destroying the dwarf's home. Not before Snow White gives him a beautiful necklace from her parents. Well, yes, Jonathan will have a reason to come back to her. Wow, in less than 5 minutes, she's already given him a significant family heirloom. Intriguing. In the end, they leave and try to go unnoticed so they won't get caught, but right after they catch Jonathan, just one thing. That's when Jonathan is brought before the queen. She realizes he has Snow White's necklace, so she locks him up, deciding to put an end to Snow White once and for all. Thus, the iconic scene occurs where the queen transforms into an old hag and creates the poisoned apple with Chelly. I must admit that the transformation doesn't look bad, although I feel that the sequence is rushed. Although I won't complain too much about that, considering that the original is excessively long for what it is. The pivotal scene unfolds as the dwarfs depart for work, leaving Snow White by herself in the cottage. As she tidies up, an old woman who is actually the disguised queen appears before her. And instead of doing as in the original, where she offered her an apple capable of granting any wish, here she shows her the necklace she gave to Jonathan, so she decides to go look for him on her own. As a gift, she gives her an apple to eat. During the trip, she bites into it instantly and falls to the ground, as if she had put on an episode of One Piece. No, it's not funny. I like One Piece. It's a joke. Not before the queen confesses to her that she was the one who sent her father to die, blaming his kindness for his own death. After Snow White falls dead, the queen teleports back to the castle. The dwarfs, warned by the animals, arrived too late. The queen was smarter than in the original story, at least in this movie. Many of you likely know this, but for those who don't, in the original story, the queen gives Snow White an apple. But at no point did she come up with a backup plan to escape. So the dwarves easily catch her, and, finding herself cornered, she ends up falling off a cliff and is crushed by a rock. Giving it this continuation seems curious and interesting to me. Or that's what I would say if what they did with her was something worth telling. Anyway, where was I? Ah yes, the damn dead woman. Snow White is dead, and the dwarfs built her an altar while Jonathan remains imprisoned with the hunter. And even though the latter has lost the will to escape, seeing Jonathan so determined to save Snow White, he decides to get up and help him escape. I also tell you what a shit of chains. Didn't the budget give or what? They escape only to find Snow White dead with the dwarfs paying tribute to her. So the prince gives her a farewell kiss. And here's something curious that Raquelita said because, according to her, the prince was a stalker for kissing Snow White without her consent. To which, while the way these two meet at the beginning is a bit strange, the kiss is more than anything a farewell gesture with someone who, remember, was quite dead. Also, hadn't they removed the kissing scene? In the remake, Snow White manages to wake up from the kiss of true love. I'm also telling you, although I think everyone knows that the apple's spell is broken by the kiss of true love. The movie doesn't mention it at any point, so we'll see how this ages. After a few little kisses and Dopey speaking for the first time, yes, I know that sounds weird, they resolve to halt the queen. The ensuing scene left me feeling quite embarrassed secondhand. Even by this movie's standards, when Snow White arrives at the village hooded, she draws everyone's attention as she removes the hood. She begins singing, and the whole village follows her lead. The queen appears and tells Snow White to take the kingdom if she wants it. It's unclear if everyone is drugged. The scene ends abruptly, thus handing her a dagger so that she can be the one to end the queen's life. But Snow White refuses to take the kingdom with blood on her hands, so the queen gets bored and orders her to be killed. However, the queen didn't anticipate that Snow White possesses the ultimate power, the power of memory. That's when she loudly mentions the names of all the guards who were there inside. Ready to execute her, the same guards who were about to kill her and who had been looting the village for years. They just had to hear their princess remember their name, to leave everything behind and rebel against their queen. At no point did they think what they were doing was wrong. Between the people who rebelled just to hear a woman sing and the guards who gave up their years-long vocation. Because a girl remembers their names, I don't know which sons of bitches to side with. So the queen, seeing that she has nothing left, returns to her little mirror so it can remind her how beautiful she is. But the latter tells her something devastating. You are beautiful on the outside, but inside you are horrendous. Her beauty lies within, unlike Snow White. How's my rhyme? This is a bit strange because more or less the mirror. What he's saying is that Snow White isn't particularly beautiful, but that her beauty is on the inside. When in the original version, she was supposed to be beautiful, inside and out. And even at this point, who the hell cares? Seeing that Snow White is more beautiful, in quotes, the queen goes into a rage and breaks the mirror in anger. Although, truthfully, if the queen had more than 50 intelligence quotient, she would have said, I may be the most beautiful, but she is a good person, and I'm not. I already know this about myself. So technically, everyone could have been somewhat happy in that sense. If I stop to think about it, well, I'm rambling. What does it matter? The queen breaks the mirror and is absorbed by it in some kind of ironic attempt. And now the tyranny is over. Everyone dresses in white and dances. Will you expand the original story, friends? I'll stick with the 2012 version where Kristen Stewart played Snow White and Chris Hemsworth was the huntsman. What a disaster. And before I start with the conclusions, I must say that I am very envious of those people who started posting tweets mocking that they went to see Snow White. And there was no one. Because although there weren't many people in my room, there were very small children, some of whom were even crying. Where to start? Being a remake of a movie that is 88 years old, it was evident that changes were going to arise. Now, I believe the biggest problem with this movie is that it's a footage without a damn identity, none at all. I like that they take a story that originally had nothing complex about it and expand it. The original movie didn't need so much background, but it's appreciated. The prince briefly appears early in the film to express his love for Snow White, then vanishes until the end when she is already dead. He shows up, gives her a kiss, and they both go to hell together. Here, at least, they try to build a relationship between these two, so that in the end the kiss carries more weight. But as for the rest, oh god. Gal Gadot's evil queen is a very boring and funny character in a bad way. They sell it to you from the first second as a complex character, and I don't know what. But all of that falls apart when you realize it's exactly the same as the original, just with more filler. Gal Gadot's performance is subpar due to her poor acting skills, which doesn't improve the movie. I'm glad I watched the dubbed version because after seeing clips of Gal Gadot's English singing, I felt suicidal. Additionally, clips of her performances in her native language have surfaced, showcasing the magic of dubbing. Now there's also the problem with the mirror. What a damn troll, the troll face. In both versions, the mirror's opinion changes, telling the queen that Snow White, not her, is the most beautiful. Should I say there's a good point and a bad one? The good point is that the mirror's change of opinion about Snow White's beauty happens just as she begins to rebel against the queen. So it's more justified that after years of telling the queen that she herself is the most beautiful, it suddenly changes its mind. The bad point is that the mirror always talks about beauty in general, and it was only until the end of the movie that the mirror specifies about inner beauty. If the mirror told her Snow White's beauty was internal, two things could have changed everything. Either the queen didn't give a damn about inner beauty just like that, or she decided to become nice. And to see, even if it's selfish, to be more beautiful, let's just say the son of a bitch in the mirror was extremely obtuse and abstract. At no point did I understand, because, anyway, if he said that the queen was the most beautiful, then he was referring to her physical appearance. But then Snow White's heart surpassed the physical level. How the hell do you compare? How do you measure the power scaling between feelings and the physical? Look, I don't understand. A fucking shit. This mirror is a son of a bitch. The special effects are shit. The suit looks like a cheap cosplay, and the haircut looks like, I don't know. It looks like Dora the Explorer. I don't know. As I said before, honestly, I feel that the original plan, based on Rachel's own statements from the leaks, was going to make this movie more of an anti-system revolutionary story than a love story. But with all the terrible things Rachel said, added to the fans' discontent with this nearly 90-year-old movie, Disney panicked and decided to cut all the scenes with these 7 bandits, and added the 7 dwarves. I added the love story as the entire 7 bandits issue is quite bizarre and absurd. Almost 9 years after its announcement, thousands of controversies, many re-recordings, a budget that not even Disney itself wants to admit, and a premiere that, personally, is very poor. In fact, the people who have been talking about the movie the most are us, the content creators. To express our discontent, to simply mock, or to create content, which is what we do. And let's hope that with this movie, the era of mediocre, purposeless live action from Disney starts to end. Because these movies are time. Time of people who dedicate months of their life to bring a product to life. And not just because of the narcissistic girl who can't shut up, and a studio that's desperate to do well with this movie. Instead of creating iconic and emotional movies like before, they now focus on exploiting old franchises to appeal to nostalgia. We've reached a point where we can't risk anything. We live a bit in a stagnation where what's left we've seen years ago, but with a new hat. I really hope Helio, the next Disney and Pixar movie, is successful. Not due to blind company loyalty, but so the studio gradually takes more risks with new things. Because the last thing I want is for them to release mediocre live actions or non-stop sequels. Anyway, here comes the live action of Lilo and Stitch and Inside Out 3, so we'll see how that goes. In conclusion, forgive me for everything. Dragon Ball Evolution.